Hello everyone. Today, as part of my series of one video for each canto of the Divine Comedy, I'd like to do a video that is a little bit unusual because it's not about a specific canto, but it's about Virgil. In particular, I'm going to try to shed some light on the reason why Dante decided to put Virgil in Limbo, and the reason why in the 30th canto of Purgatorio, Virgil turns around and disappears from the stage for good. That's, I believe, a very crucial point in Divine Comedy that deserves a lot of attention. And I'm going to try and do my best in articulating that. So Dante himself is actually explaining to us in some tercets in the third canto of Purgatorio, in a nutshell, the reason why Virgil has to leave. And I'm going to read the Italian here. At verse 34, canto number 3 in Purgatorio, Dante says: Matto è chi spera che nostra ragione possa trascorrere la infinita via che tiene una sustanza in tre persone. State contenti, umana gente, alquia, che, se potute aveste veder tutto, mestier non era parturir Maria, e disir vedeste senza frutto, tai che sarebbe lor disio quetato, che eternalmente è dato d'or per lutto. Io dico d'Aristotele e di Plato e di molti altri. The translation is: Insane who hopes our reason may that space explore, which holds three persons in one substance knit. Seek not the wherefore, race of humankind, could you have seen the whole, no need had been for Mary to bring forth. Moreover, you have seen such men desiring fruitlessly. To those desires repose would have been given, that now but serve them for eternal grief. I speak of Plato and the Stagirite, and others many more. The Stagirite being Aristotle. So why is Virgil talking about these mysteries? And he's talking about these mysteries in a melancholic way, in a sad way. Why is he talking about these mysteries that cannot be reached by human reason when he is reason incarnate? He's incarnating human reason and the classical wisdom. He's saying if reason alone could satisfy the knowledge, the desire to know everything, Aristotle and Plato wouldn't have been condemned to limbo. They wouldn't be there. So we need to stop already here, because aren't we talking about human reason? And this sounds like Dante is speaking against human reason, which is not the case. But let's try to understand exactly what Dante is doing. From our point of view, from the modern point of view, there is nothing wrong with reason, but also human reason is, at least for the secular world, all we need to understand the world. After all, science is based on reason, and anything that makes any sense at all for us today is coming from our rational analysis, at least for the secular world. So is Dante saying that we should go beyond reason and be irrational? Is that what he's asking us? I would say to make a tentative to try and explain this, or to try to understand it ourselves. Let's try to think of an image. Let's try to put this in a modern context and think of imagine a temple, a Greek temple, let's say, where the temple has only the roof, and this roof is suspended in midair. There's no columns supporting the roof, and this roof is just hovering out there in midair. This is, in my opinion, along the lines of what Dante is saying in the Divine Comedy, a view of our modern Western civilization. And let me try to explain it. On one hand, we are very happy that science came, the scientific method in the 16th century, 17th century, and took all those superstitions, all those scientific mistakes, or at least most of them, and took them away, clarified them, corrected them, so that we are happy today that we were able to move on from all those superstitions and mistakes. I think this is great, and we all agree on that. Doesn't matter what we believe. What we don't seem to agree on is the consequences of this scientific revolution, and that's where a big cultural difference opens up, and where I believe Dante, through the image of Virgil, can help us understand it. We could say that in the last couple of centuries, by devaluing everything that is not scientific, a big portion of the Western thought has, so to say, thrown away the baby with the bathwater, where the bathwater is all this group of superstitions and mistaken beliefs that had to be thrown away. But the baby is the absolutely deepest root and ground of our morality. And this baby has nothing to do with science at all. Therefore, what Dante saw as this baby in the metaphor is absolutely valid still today. So when I read the Divine Comedy and I see that after 64 magnificent cantos, Virgil has to leave us, yes, I am a little bit moved for the loss of a beloved character, because we all love Virgil, but I don't care too much about that, because really I know that this is not the main point that Dante is making. What I care the most is the crucial point that Dante is trying to make with the departure of Virgil. There are two important reasons why Virgil is leaving us. The first one is more personal to Dante, and it has to do with his poetic role. Dante is the pupil who's been following the master Virgil, and he is surpassing the master in his skill, in his craft, in his mastery, really. So he's going beyond Virgil. Okay, that's something that had to do mostly with Dante. The second reason is more universal, and it's really crucial, because it's the main message that Dante is trying to send us with his Divine Comedy across 7 centuries. And he's telling us, I wrote the Divine Comedy to explain to you, to tell you why Virgil must leave to go back to Limbo, and so that you, readers, find your own way to long-lasting happiness and to the truth. So if this is what Dante is telling us, and knowing that Virgil represents rationality and the classic wisdom, what does this mean for us today, for our own life? It means that if we want to grow fully and find our greatest happiness, the best way to do that for us is to move beyond our rationality, although this doesn't mean to become irrational. So let's try to look at it from the point of view of our Western culture. Our culture was built by people who saw something that Virgil couldn't see, Virgil didn't see. They went beyond the ancient hubris and the ancient paganism of the classic period. These people saw something that Virgil couldn't see. They changed their minds and understood that, for example, slavery and infanticide were wrong. Infanticide in the ancient Roman Empire was something that was okay, especially if the infant was very weak or maybe handicapped, etc. Slavery is a perfect example, because the point that we are all equal today is very far from self-evident. In fact, it might be the most non-evident principle that we base our modern society on. Many friends of mine tell me that the concept that every person is worth the same is so obvious that we don't need to ground it in any philosophical or theological framework. The problem with this view is that if you think about it properly, this concept is not only the opposite of obvious, but it's also outrageous. It's nothing less than a declaration of war on the world, on our world, because if there's one thing that our world teaches us since we are really very young, is that, and every single day of our life, is that the value of every person is most definitely not the same. So this applied to marriage as well, going back to Western culture. Those people who saw something that Virgil couldn't see, they changed their mind and also understood that a wife should not be seen as a man's property, but as his equal. And so from a principal point of view, the man should love her, which in the ancient Roman Empire was not even considered. Another example, the people who build our civilization, they saw something that made change their minds and say that our center of gravity should not be the strength and power as it had always been, but it should be love. And as soon as they said that, they were taken for lunatics, they were taken for clowns, they were persecuted, and yet they insisted that the greatest people among us are not the most powerful, the strongest, like the Roman emperor, for example, or the ones who win all the wars, like Aeneas, or the most cunning ones, like Ulysses, or even the strongest one, the physically strongest one, like Gilgamesh. But the greatest people are the ones who put love more strongly, more actively, and more creatively at the very center of their life. So our heroes completely changed. And what happened in 33 AD, everybody in Jerusalem was waiting for this king at the head of a powerful army. But instead, what they got was this guy on dirty clothes riding on a donkey. And he was followed by a bunch of fishermen who were actually lying through their teeth to save their own lives. So what can stand against the world and more than this? What is more unscientific and what is more not in line with reason than this? When everything about our world, when everything about physics is about energy and power, that's what our reason tells us. Virgil couldn't see any of this. Using his rationality, I would think that our civilization is nothing but a temporary one, like all other civilizations, and many civilizations have come, many will go, and everything will just tumble around randomly like lottery balls in a cage, without any particular sense or meaning, that there is no objective stance, and that in the end everything is relative. So on the basis that nothing really matters, that there is no truth outside of science, and that the universe doesn't care about me because it's indifferent, I would then go back to my self-indulgence, back to seeking as much pleasure for myself in this life as I can. And why not? That, I have to make the most of it. This is all there is. There is no higher meaning at all. And plus, I've read tons of books. And I confuse intelligence with wisdom. So nothing is true outside of science. This is what I know. I know it. And yet we hear Dante's voice, Dante's powerful voice, across the centuries. He's screaming to us that there is so much that Virgil, in this interpretation of reality, is missing. Virgil is saying, sure, I can help you out of a difficult moment. I can help you out of the dark woods. But Dante knows that Virgil is not the right guide to take him to the best place where Dante can be. Dante understood something that Virgil could not understand during his lifetime. That he actually did not understand because Virgil did not see, because it hadn't happened yet. And what was that? At one level, we could say that this was a step forward in the maturation of our collective consciousness, a step forward of our way of, as a society, as a Western civilization, looking at things. So it's not simply unfair that Virgil died before that happened and that he has to spend eternity in limbo. When we read the Divine Comedy, we tend to see that as a random injustice, the fact that Virgil ends up in limbo and he cannot be saved. We feel sorry for him. But we need to look at it from Dante's point of view. Dante is making an important anthropological point by putting Virgil in limbo. Because this step forward in our collective conscience could not have happened before, just in the same way that you cannot be a mature adult when you are 9-year-old or 10-year-old. At another level, Dante is also asking us, what is beyond rationality? The answer is not irrationality, but the answer is trust. And not blind or stupid trust, just exactly the opposite. Is trust that is informed and enlightened by reason and experience that comes from seeing after having been blind. This concept of seeing is something that is very dear to Dante, keeps recurring in the Divine Comedy. In fact, all the words that come from seeing are repeated the most in the Divine Comedy. And seeing is understanding. For example, I just finished a body read of Crime and Punishment, and I was reminded that in Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov doesn't see or understand that an old lady who practices usury and who's only a nuisance or a useless person in his view deserves the same type of love and respect that he, you, and I deserve. Luckily, in the novel, there is a character called Sonia who reminds him that, and it actually causes Raskolnikov's salvation. She, in a certain sense, saves his soul. So, how did this strange and non-evident idea make its way to Dostoevsky's heart as an author, and therefore into the novel, into Sonia, into Raskolnikov? Well, someone had to die in order to go to war, not against the Roman Empire or a particular enemy, but against the brutal laws of power of the world, in the name of the love that moves the sun and the other stars. To make a long story short, I can choose to deny God or to open my heart to Him, and both these choices deserve the utmost respect. Dante, though, wants us to see what it is that I am denying if I deny God. If I do that, I am denying the pillars or that our culture rests upon, the columns of the temple of our civilization. So back to the image I mentioned at the beginning, I'm here at the Acropolis looking at this temple roof suspended in midair with the pediment and bas-reliefs and everything, and there's nothing to support it. And that's a perfect image of my internal world, because I'm there saying, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's absolutely obvious that we all deserve the same love and respect, that every single life is sacred. There are even sociological studies that scientifically prove this point. I can choose to think like that, but if I do, whether I like it or not, I'm just as ridiculous as a branch who is rebelling against a tree. Ultimately, I'm denying my own deepest meaning. So this is the real reason why Virgil must leave and must go back to Limbo. If we want to find the source of everything that is good, to get to the best possible place that we as human beings can be, we need to move past it. We need to move past rationality and into trust. Not irrationality, but trust. And maybe Dante has never been as relevant as and important than today, because when in history have we had a time when there was this immense mass of people who had so much comfort in their life, and they could live like spoiled teenagers until their death. People who, in general, see wisdom as something boring and not vital as it is. In the end, with the greatest work of literature in the world, what Dante is really demanding is that we grow up. Thanks for watching.